Hello again. It's Stephanie Clegg, licensed associate counselor, here to bring you yet another mental health moment. I know I shared with you various on various topics during the month of May, which was Mental Health Awareness Month. And I know that we are in the month of June and we're still going based on your feedback, your comments. And thank you so much for receiving this information, sharing this information, and letting me know that it's helpful and it's informational. So we want to be our best versions of ourselves, and we also want to be in a position to understand others around us and be able to support them. So on tonight, it is nighttime here in New Jersey. I am talking about ADHD. So that's the topic of the day, ADHD, which stands for Attention-Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And I know many of us are familiar with probably a child that has been diagnosed with ADHD. There are some adults that are diagnosed as ADHD as well, but most of us are familiar with kids being diagnosed as ADHD. So I'm going to just share some pertinent information and maybe a couple things that you may not know about ADHD, and then we'll talk about best practices to help someone who has been diagnosed with ADHD. So the information I'm going to share with you um, is coming from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorder. This is what we call the DSM-5. This is the diagnostic standard for those who are in the mental health field. And ADHD is defined as a persistent pattern of inattention and or hyperactivity dash impulsivity that interferes with functioning or development. So the first thing I want you to know about ADHD is that you can have an attention deficit and be labeled as ADHD without the hyperactivity part. If you notice when I said it was a pattern of inattention and or hyperactivity. So you can be hyperactive or impulsive and have an ADHD diagnosis, or you can have both. Some people have the attention deficit and they have the hyperactivity or impulsivity characteristics, and they're also labeled ADHD as well. A couple of criteria for the inattention part or the attention deficit part of ADHD is basically the person is characterized as wandering off task, lacking persistence, having difficulty sustaining focus, and being disorganized. So those are just some of the criteria for attention deficit. They don't follow through on instructions or fails to finish like schoolwork or task or duties in the workplace. They have difficulty managing sequential tasks, things that need to be in order or in sequence. This can also cause them to fail. They can fail to meet deadlines as well. Um, they often lose things that are necessary for tasks. So a kid in school, for example, will lose books and pens and pencils and paper, and adults will lose their wallet, their keys, their cell phones, things like that. And then forgetting daily activities, like forgetting chores, um, and in children, and then in adults, maybe forgetting to return calls, forgetting to pay bills, but they don't pay close attention to details. So they make a lot of careless mistakes in school and at work. So those are just some of the criteria of the attention deficit part of this disorder. And in order to, I'm going to share this with you as well, in order to be diagnosed as having ADHD, um, a person would have to have six or more of the symptoms, some of the symptoms that I just went over, reviewed with you for the inattention, and then it's going to be six or more of the hyperactivity characteristics as well. And it has to have been persistent for at least 6 months. So the person has to have had these shown these characteristics or for at least 6 months, and it has to directly negatively impact them socially, academically, or in their occupational activities. So the second half of ADHD, as I mentioned, is the hyperactivity and impulsivity. Um, some of the characteristics or the criteria for the hyperactivity part refers to excessive motor activity. They give the example of a child running around. One of the things that I read in the DSM-5 is that it's almost like they have a motor in them, and the motor is just going, and they're going and going, and they're unable to sit still in times when they should be sitting still, such as in a classroom for children, or let's say a conference or a meeting for the adults, um, and very impulsive in what they do without thinking, like without any forethought. Um, they act. So some of the actions may include for children running around and climbing on things. For the adults, they may have feelings of restlessness. They're often on the go, like I said, almost as if they're like the Energizer Bunny. They're driven by, almost like they're driven by a motor. They talk excessively, um, difficulty waiting for their turn, right? They're impatient, and they often interrupt or intrude others, meaning that they will interrupt your conversation, right? Butt into your conversation. They'll take your things or use your things without asking. So part of that is a part of the impulsivity or the hyperactivity part of ADHD. So here's some facts. ADHD begins in childhood, and the requirement is that several of the symptoms present themselves before the age of 12 years old, right? So before the age of 12, some of these symptoms are occurring in children, and ADHD is most often identified in elementary school. Okay. ADHD occurs in most cultures, in about 5% of the children, and in 2.5% of adults also are diagnosed with ADHD. The manifestation of this disorder must be present in more than one setting, which means you have to, between like work, school, and let's say home life, the person has to exhibit these characteristics in more than one setting. Um, Males are more frequently diagnosed with females diagnosed with ADHD than females in the general population. Oh, and there's something called heritability, and it has to do with genetics. So ADHD is elevated in first degree biological relatives of individuals with ADHD. In other words, if your parents, one of your parents, or both of your parents have ADHD, your chances of being diagnosed with ADHD, if you are their children, is higher. It's a higher elevated level. So those are the basics about ADHD. Um, there's a comorbidity rate, which means when one thing happens, another thing typically happens along with it. So there's a high comorbidity rate between ADHD and anxiety at about 51%, which means people with ADHD, 51%, there's a 51% chance that that person will also exhibit or experience anxiety. And then there's also a 32% comorbidity rate with depression. So people who have anxiety, people who have ADHD may also experience depression. There's a 32% chance for that. So then finally, how can we help someone? How do we live with someone with ADHD? Um, and you've heard some of the challenges with attention, some of the challenges with impulsivity and hyperactivity. Um, One of the ways that has been proven helpful for people with ADHD is breaking down complex tasks or unpleasurable tasks, things that people don't like doing. Breaking it down into more manageable parts. I have a client that her son is diagnosed with ADHD, and she doesn't understand why she has to keep repeating every week to take the trash out, take the trash out, take the trash out, take the recyclables out. But I shared with her and we created a chores chart. So on the chart, the trash day, let's say if it's Tuesday and Friday, on Monday and Thursday, there's a note on the chart that says take the trash out. And then the recyclables are every other, I think every other Wednesday or something like that. So there's a note on every other Tuesday to take the recyclables out. So doing something as simple as that, like breaking complex tasks down into more manageable parts, is extremely helpful for people with ADHD. So I hope you found this helpful. Share this information. Be kind to someone with ADHD. Try to understand. Try to work within their ability instead of focusing on their disability. So thank you, and I'll see you on the next video.